This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. They include political analyst and lobbyist Peg O'Connell, John Hood from the John Locke Foundation, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and political consultant Doug Raymond from the eastern part of the state. We've got a show loaded with hot topics this week. We begin by discussing some surprising and not so surprising filings for the 2014 elections. We'll examine Governor McCrory's new Medicaid reform proposals. If we get a chance, we'll talk about the hold on school vouchers. And as always, we'll ask our panelists to tell us something we don't know. So let's get started. The deadline for filing to run in the 2014 elections is over, and we know who will be on the ballot for the May 6th primaries. 55 of our 170 state legislators, almost a third, will not face a challenger for the November general elections. Only about 10% are considered competitive races. 3 congressmen or congresspersons have a primary challenge, and in one of them, whoever wins the primary is going to win the congressional seat. And there was a well-known public figure who entered the race. Chris, we've talked quite a bit on this show about the problems associated with gerrymandering legislative districts. But were you surprised just how many had little or no competition?
Well, I was a little surprised that when there's nothing on the ballot in the fall by either party, because you never know what's going to happen. Somebody could withdraw. There could be some huge change in the political winds. But I do think your underlying point is correct, that we have far too many seats that are safe. There are always going to be safe seats. But I think it's hard to talk a candidate into giving up the time, spending money, or getting an organization together when the chances of winning in the majority of seats in the General Assembly are over as soon as the filing deadline begins or ends, because of the way the districts were drawn. That was true when the Democrats drew the districts. It's even more true when the Republicans drew the districts. And I think it speaks loudly to a need to rethink the way we draw legislative districts. We need more competition. Voters need more choices, not fewer.
Jane Penske would love to hear you saying that.
Tom, I agree with Chris about redistricting reform, and we worked on the issue before, but I think that the point's a bit overstated. Obviously, there were many districts that were safely Democratic or safely Republican, and therefore there isn't any competition. But frankly, many districts that are leaning Republican but potentially competitive, or actually swing districts that don't have a lean one way or the other, were either left on the table by the Democrats, or they recruited people at the last minute who don't seem to have a lot of an organization or campaign together. So I think that while redistricting is a factor in the lack of competition, it doesn't explain why Democrats aren't aggressively challenging Republicans in districts they actually could win.
You make a very good point. The Democrats, Doug, you're a strategist, campaign consultant, the Democrats pretty much admitted that there was no way they were going to retake control of the legislature, but they were hoping to make some real inroads so far as numbers are concerned. You've looked at the filing data. Does it look like they're going to gain many seats here in this?
Probably not many, but let me give a partisan pat on the back and a little history here. In 2010, when Tom Fetzer was the GOP chairman, and that was the year that election was going to decide who drew the maps, one of the first things that Tom did was said, we're going to find a candidate in every legislative race, no matter whether we think we can win them or not. And what the philosophy was is, even if you were running up against, Mark Basnight's a classic example. Mark knew he wasn't going to lose, but just your pride and your ego, you're still going to spend money in your race to make sure that you win by a certain number, and that's money that he wasn't doling out to other people in tighter races.
Good point.
So that was part of our philosophy when I worked for Tom at the GOP. And, that's to me what's puzzling is the Democrats should be filing, and the Republicans who also let Democrats go unopposed, you should always file somebody there because
somebody
it keeps them from
said the
spreading money
Democrats
around.
need to find them a Tom Fetzer. Would you agree with that?
Well, obviously I'm partisan, but I would. He was a darn good chairman.
Well, one of the things, and everybody's mentioned it, is it's so extraordinarily expensive to run a legislative race in this state, and the House in Wake County. $250,000 to get a job that will pay you $14,000 a year. There's something wrong with that.
I want to ask you about Wake County, because one of the more interesting events during this filing took place in Wake County when Senator Neil Hunt announced at the last minute. Now, we'd heard rumblings about this for several weeks, but at the last minute, he announced publicly he wasn't going to run for re-election. And then Dr. Jim Fulgham, who's serving in the House, announced that he was going to run for Neal's Senate seat. And then, lo and behold, we also have an announcement that former Secretary of Transportation Tom Bradshaw jumps into this race. This is going to be a pretty interesting situation in Wake County, isn't it?
Well, I think Wake County is one of those places where the Democrats do have chances. There are more races in flux, but again, it's also where you have to spend extraordinary amounts of money. And if you don't have that kind of money, and we can say it, I'll say it, I'm a Democrat, the Democrats are in disarray. So, I mean, they don't have a Tom Fetzer, they don't have anybody
not
right
even
now.
In array.
Yeah, they're not, yeah, that's right, there's no Ray there.
But Wake County is a critical part of the 2014 story. It's the one place where Democrats have some opportunities to win, not only the legislative level, but also they're trying to take back the county commission. Remember that the Jim Fulgham seat that he's giving up in the House is not going to be actively contested by, among other people, Gary Pendleton, who's another blast from the past, former chairman of the county commission in Wake. So a lot of interesting people and interesting races in Wake County.
Yeah, I was going to get to that. Let's talk about the U.S. Senate race, Chris, because I think this is going to be very interesting. We have 8 Republicans and 3 Democrats and 2 Libertarians that have filed to run for this U.S. Senate seat, which I think speaks to the fact that there's a lot of interest in capturing it. But what does it say about Kay Hagan and her vulnerability?
Well, she's clearly one of the most vulnerable incumbent senators in the country. I think the national money pouring in here against her already, $7-8 million. I think you're starting to see money on her side come in to counter that. But the real story in the Senate race in the primary is, can Tom Tillis get 40% with so many people in the race? No matter, we still haven't seen a huge amount of money spent by anybody, including him. But the whole story on election night in the Senate race is, will he get to 40%, or will we ever be a runoff?
With 8 candidates in this race, how likely is that?
I'm not a prognosticator as far as the numbers. I've heard some people say yes, but I think what happened with Brannon in the court case, I'm going to be honest with you, I thought the Tea Party folks would stick with him a little bit. I've been to 2 Tea Party meetings since that court case, and I'm sure I'm going to get an email from the Brannon people, but they're bailing. They think that he's really hurt his chances. So it's going to be close, but that's vital for Tillis to get more than 40%, because if he has a runoff, that's going to be really hard to deal with.
Let's move to some of the congressional races, because there's some interesting things going on there. There's a 9-4 split with the Republicans and Democrats as things now stand. There are 3 vacancies for seats that are open. In one particular race, though, I want to get to Robert Pittenger's race. The Tea Party listed him as their #1 target. He's got a primary opponent, but no challenger whatsoever in the general election. How difficult is it going to be for Pittenger just to serve his 2nd term, John?
Not going to be difficult at all.
Yeah, that's what
remember, there is no Tea Party. Like the Tea Party decided to do this.
Right.
People say, hey, I'm the Tea Party in this county, or I'm the Tea Party in this town, or I'm the Tea Party in this neighborhood. And so there's a challenger against Pittenger. We're frequently seen with incumbent congressmen or congresswomen getting challengers. Pittenger is in no trouble. He will be easily reelected.
Let's take the 2nd congressional district. Renee Elmers also has challenges there. She's got a primary challenge in Frank Roach, which I think speaks to your point about she's going to have to spend money and energy defeating a primary challenger. And then she's got 3 Democrats that are running against her, Chris, including Clay Aiken and Keith Crisco, who was the former Secretary of Commerce. There are a lot of people saying that while Clay Aiken is going to make a lot of noise, he's really not going to draw many votes. First of all, there are not a lot of Democrats in the district to start off with, but how do you handicap that one?
Well, it's fascinating. I mean, he certainly has a lot of name recognition, and Keith Crisco does too in Randolph County, but I'm not sure how many people know him on the outside of the county, although I think he's a very strong candidate. I think he's very well respected. He's a moderate to conservative Democrat. It'll be fascinating to see how Clay Aiken's name recognition, I think he'll have some resources, match up against Crisco. I certainly don't think that Elmers will have any problems in the primary, with the exception of, I'm sure that Frank Roach will try to push her further. How she positions herself in the primary may come back to haunt her a little bit in the general election.
All right, I want to talk about the 3 vacant seats when we come back after these messages. I want to remind you, NC Spin is now available on most Time Warner cable systems throughout the state. And you can find out the channel numbers and times by visiting our website, ncspin.com. But you can watch the show anytime or any recent show by visiting ncspin.com and clicking on the box on the right-hand side of the page. We post each show on Friday, so when you visit ncspin.com, read our weekly column along with the columns from other of our panelists and other columns throughout the state. Give your opinions, and don't forget us on NC Spin on Facebook. After these messages, we'll talk more about the 2014 filings.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
The slogan on our family farm is growing the next generation. It means using innovative technology to conserve water and increase yields. It embodies our passion for providing food and fiber for our neighbors near and far. It represents our desire to take care of our employees, our land, and to leave a better place for our children. Farm life isn't easy, but it's a good life, and I love what I do.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception. Keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
We now return to NC Spin.
We continue our look at the 2014 elections and the filings that just ended a week or so ago. We want to talk some more about the congressional seats. There are 3 vacant seats that candidates lined up to fill for the 6th, 7th, and 12th districts. In the 6th district, we got 9 Republicans, 2 Democrats vying for this open seat. John, is anybody you consider a front runner in this district?
There are several candidates in that Republican primary that could win. People in Raleigh assume Phil Berger Jr., except, you know, people in the district don't agree that he's the obvious winner. There are a number of other people. There's Zach Matheny, who's a councilman in Greensboro. There are a number of other candidates on the ballot there. So I think it's an unpredictable race at this moment.
Is it foregone that it's going to be a Republican winner?
Absolutely. The Republican will win in the fall, most, you know, I'd say 90%. But who gets the primary win, I could not tell you.
Doug, in the southeastern part of the state, the 7th district, Mike McIntyre's seat, we've got 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and 2 Libertarians in there. David Rouser, of course, ran a very close race in 2012 with McIntyre, and many people consider him the front runner. But I've heard a lot of chatting about Woody White. How do you handicap this race?
Well, Woody White's a name that whenever anything in Republican circles has happened around Wilmington, his name comes up. He's been very well respected for quite a long time. He's done a lot of work there, and he's, in a very short period of time, he's assembled a pretty impressive team, and especially an impressive fundraising team. And if you're one of those people who thinks, you know, that in these type of races, money is going to be a deciding factor, he's got a good fundraising team behind him.
They always say follow the money. Peg, let's look at Mel Watt's 12th district. This is going to be an interesting thing, and it's going to be absolutely crazy because we got 2 different elections going on at the same time. The first one is to fill the unexpired term of Mel Watt, and then the second one is actually the primary election for the November general election. There are some candidates running for the unexpired term that are not running for. I mean, do you have any idea how we can simplify and make some sense out of this election?
I feel like you just gave me a law school exam question. I had so many moving parts. Well, you know, I think there are serious candidates for eventually to take that seat. You've got Alma Adams, you've got Marcus Brandon, and so and they're serious about wanting to go to Malcolm Graham wanting to go to Congress for the long term. So I mean, that's the thing to keep your eye on. The person who shows up to hang out for a few months and say they have been in Congress, it's not. I don't think we need to even. I mean, it's important to fill that seat, but it's not important to take your eye off the bigger prize.
But isn't that going to confuse the voters in the district?
Oh, I think voters are going to be extraordinarily confused. I don't think they know that they don't have a congressperson right now. I've never seen anything like that. Congress is important except when you have to hold an election to send somebody there. That doesn't even make sense to me.
If you look at the vote distribution in that district, the candidate out of the Charlotte area ought to have be the favorite.
Right.
But I'm not sure that that's what's happening.
And it ought to be a Democrat.
Well, it will be a Democrat, no
yeah.
question. But I'm saying there are more votes closer to Charlotte than there are closer to the Triad in that district. But, we'll see what happens.
All right, let's look at the court cases, because we've got several appellate court races that are going to be taking place. Anything that was startling or grabbing?
There are two news items there. One is that Ola Lewis, who was going to run for, most people thought, for a different state Supreme Court seat, instead filed to run for Chief Justice.
Against Mark Martin.
Against Mark Martin. So these are two Republicans running against each other in a district, in a seat that had been held by a Democrat. In a nonpartisan race, of course. There's also a seat that has 3 candidates, which means there will be a primary and winnow it down to 2. That's Eric Levinson and Jeanette Doran.
That's the Robin Hudson seat.
Who are both running to try to unseat the incumbent, Robin Hudson. Hudson's the Democrat, and the other 2 candidates are Republicans. So we'll see what happens in the nonpartisan primary to get to the nonpartisan election. That will be very partisan.
Well, as you, I hope you know by now, NC Spin is going to be talking about this right up until the election day. And sometime after that, too, and we'll also be talking about the general election, so be sure to stay tuned for that for the coming weeks. After these messages, we're going to talk about Medicaid Reform, Part 2.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
You trust your family physician to care for you and your family. We treasure that trust and are committed to providing the best care possible for all North Carolinians. It's time for Medicaid reform, but not without input from North Carolina's family physicians. Medicaid reform will impact health care for all of us. Tell state leaders you want your physician involved. We need Medicaid reform that's good for North Carolina. To sign our petition of support, visit rnchealthcare.com.
With over 30 years of catering experience in the Triangle, why not bring the innovative style of the Irregardless Cafe and Catering to your next event? Our event specialists can assist with the planning of business meetings, cocktail parties, and sit-down meals for receptions and gatherings. We do it all. For your next event and special occasion, contact Irregardless Cafe and Catering.
We now return to NC Spin.
Most everyone agrees North Carolina's $13 billion Medicaid program needs fixing, especially in being able to predict and control cost. Governor McCrory proposed reforms in 2013, but met with stiff opposition from the medical community and the legislature. Meanwhile, Medicaid's problems worsened. Last week, the governor unveiled his latest iteration of Medicaid reform. Instead of managed care, the new program calls for expanding some 20 accountable care organizations, which could be formed by health care providers, and seems to salvage the Community Care North Carolina program. Peg, we were told that the primary goals of Medicaid reform were to provide better care while being able to predict and control costs to the state. Now, we don't know a lot about these affordable care organizations, but do you think that they will, in fact, control cost, limit cost to the Medicaid program? What do you think about this new reform proposal?
Well, accountable care organizations are a form of managed care, just like managed care is a form of accountable care. And we have seen at the...
I think I said affordable care, didn't I? It's accountable care. I'm sorry.
But accountable care comes from the Affordable Care Act, so there's no reason not to be confused. We've seen at the Medicare level, these accountable care organizations form up and start to actually deliver some of the shared savings that they were designed to deliver. So we have these networks in North Carolina around Medicare, and we're going to have more of them formed around Medicaid. And so the early evidence is that they can deliver some shared savings. But what you've done is you've shifted from paying per procedure, so there's a benefit to having 10 colonoscopies, to getting quality measures that will determine what is best for the patient and what will deliver the best for the best health outcome for the whole population. So you're paying for quality, not for quantity.
Has any other state tried something similar to this in their Medicaid program?
Everybody has. I mean, this is the new old idea.
It's the old new idea.
Many times. In Medicare, there was just a new study done of the accountable care organizations and Medicare, new federal study, comprehensive, very little savings.
But some. I mean, it's a step in the right
direction. A minority of ACOs had small savings. Most had zero savings.
But you're starting
I wouldn't
to
get
shift
too
the
excited
conversation.
about that.
You're starting to shift the conversation to actually what we value in healthcare, which is not numbers of procedures, but good quality outcomes.
But it's still a pay-per-service kind of system, isn't it, Chris?
No, not exactly.
Kind of.
It's more getting people together and giving them a specific amount of money to treat patients.
Managed care was a per member per month.
Managed care was giving a private organization money and saying, take care of these people, in effect. This is getting the providers together as providers, and
these providers are often private organizations.
Well, I was going to ask about that.
It's not a third
party. Are we shifting from having insurance companies forming and outside organizations forming these managed care companies to having doctor groups and hospitals and even CCNC?
Well, I mean, I think John hit the nail on the head. This is stuff that everybody has tried, but 2 quick points here before we finish up. Number one, your little wordplay there. I think it's hard when you're talking about a government thing to have the word accountability come out of your mouth smoothly, because I'm just not sure it's going to happen.
That's a cheap shot.
And
that's
number
cheap.
two,
I'm surprised he's attacking Governor McCrory like that.
Well, but the other thing is about Governor McCrory is, did he learn his lesson from last year? Has he consulted the medical community that did not like his plan, and has he consulted the key people of the legislature prior to rolling this out to find out where their heartburn is in it?
That's a good question. I watched all of this, and I was listening closely. As you well know, not long ago we had Nelson Dollar on our show, who is probably the leading authority over in the legislature on Medicaid. And I was watching Nelson's reaction to this, and it was less than a very enthusiastic response to it.
He likes it a lot more than he liked the original managed care proposal.
Exactly. And so, Representative Dollar has been steady in saying we need a North Carolina solution. And in his mind, that's not just jargon. That is really, we have been able to create in this state over time a number of programs in health and other things that are groundbreaking.
All right, I got to get out of this, but final question. John, can this thing pass the legislature?
This is Representative Dollar's plan. I don't know what y'all are talking about, but this is what he is proposing. It can't pass the Senate, therefore they're going to have to start over.
Okay. When we come back, we're going to ask our panelists to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
It's true. Farming is different than it was 50 years ago. We know consumers have questions about how our food is grown today. North Carolina livestock farmers want you to know that they're using the most responsible and caring farming practices to feed our state.
NCAnimalAg.com.
We now return to NC Spin.
Well, this is one of our favorite parts of the show. We always ask our panel to pick a topic and talk about something that perhaps we don't know. The segment is called Tell Us Something We Don't Know. So, John Hood, I'll start with you. Tell us something we don't know.
Tom, we were talking earlier about the legislative race in 2014. Since the advent of two-party competition in North Carolina with the election of Jim Holzhauser in 1972, every newly elected governor has seen his or her party take a bath in the next midterm elections in the legislature. Believe it or not, new governors have seen their party lose an average of 33 legislative seats.
33?
33. That's the average in the next midterm election. 2014 isn't going to be anything like that.
Oh, okay. Peg, tell us something we don't know.
Well, we've been talking about needing money for programs and needing to fund education and things like that. If we raise the cigarette tax in North Carolina by $1, which will bring us to the national average, we could possibly bring in $350 million in the first year.
Doug, tell us something we don't know.
Well, 3 weeks ago, I told you that Tom Tillis was going to hit the television airwaves the following week, and you'd probably see Karl Rove come in and fill in the weeks. What you didn't know is I was 3 weeks off. It's coming up this coming week, so that's my prediction. That
you will finally be right.
I know, I wasn't wrong.
If you keep predicting it often enough.
Yes.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
The Eastern District of North Carolina, the federal court has never had an African-American justice, even though they have the highest population of African-Americans of any judicial district in North Carolina. There's one that's been nominated by President Obama, Jennifer May Parker, who's a prosecutor in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Richard Burr is holding up the nomination. He won't turn in his blue slip, and he won't say why. Interesting, in 2009, Burr himself endorsed that woman, Jennifer May Parker, for the judgeship. It's an outrage that he has not allowed that judgeship to be filled with a woman that he has already endorsed, and he's holding it up.
Interesting. All right, I've got one. Peg O'Connell has recently gotten married to Judge Jack Lewis.
Thank you.
We congratulate you and wish both of you the best. Guy over-married himself.
You're absolutely right, Tom.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback, read our weekly column. Be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or catch NC Spin on Facebook. And we hope you'll join us next week when we take on more issues of interest to the people of North Carolina. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.